Songs of Kabir, a 15th century Sufi classic, translated by Rabindranath Tagore. Introduction. The poet, Kabir, a selection from whose songs is here for the first time offered to English readers, is one of the most interesting personalities in the history of Indian mysticism, born in or near Benares of Mohammedan parents, Muslim. And probably about the year 1440, he became, in early life, a disciple of the celebrated Hindu ascetic Ramananda. Ramananda had brought to northern India the religious revival which Ramanuja, the great 12th century reformer of Brahmanism, had initiated in the south. This revival was, in part, a reaction against the increasing formalization of the orthodox cult, in part, an assertion of the demands of the heart as against the intense intellectualism of the Vedanta philosophy, the exaggerated monism which that philosophy proclaimed. And the Apollonian and the Dionysian do not have to be in conflict with each other. And to recapture the spirit, you don't turn against the law. That doesn't make sense. Because how can you not be intending to keep the law and yet keep the spirit? It took, in Ramanuja's preaching, the form of an ardent personal devotion to Vishnu as representing the personal aspect of the divine nature, that mystical religion of love which everywhere makes its appearance at a certain level of spiritual culture, and which creeds and philosophies are powerless to kill. Though such a devotion is indigenous in Hinduism and finds expression in many passages of the Bhagavad Gita, there was, in its medieval revival, a large element of syncretism. Ramananda, through whom the spirit is said to have reached Kabir, appears to have been a man of wide religious culture and full of missionary enthusiasm, living at the moment in which the impassioned poetry and deep philosophy of the great Persian mystics, Attar, Sadi, Jalaluddin, Rumi, and Hafiz, were exercising a powerful influence on the religious thought of India. He dreamed of reconciling this intense and personal Mohammedan mysticism with the traditional theology of Brahmanism. Some have regarded both these great religious leaders as influenced also by Christian thought and life, but as this is a point upon which the competent authorities hold widely divergent views, its discussion is not attempted here. We may safely assert, however, that in their teachings, two, perhaps three, apparently antagonistic streams of intense spiritual culture meet, as Jewish and Hellenistic thought met in the early Christian church, and it is one of the outstanding characteristics of Kabir's genius that he was able, in his poems, to fuse them into one. A great religious reformer, the founder of a sect to which nearly 1 million northern Hindus still belong, it is, yet supremely, as a mystical poet that Kabir lives for us. His fate has been that of many revealers of reality, a hater of religious exclusivism, and seeking above all things to initiate men into the liberty of the children of God. His followers have honored his memory by recreating in a new place the barriers which he labored to cast down. Now, when we say father, mother, daughter, son, or child in general, we're really saying something psychologically about ourselves. But, like, for example, if I was to say Islamic, I mean the good and truth in all paths. I don't mean to say that Islam proper is the only place where we have the Islamic, although Islam confers the truth and good in all paths. So, but his wonderful songs survive the spontaneous expressions of his vision and his love, and it is by these, not by the didactic teachings associated with his name, that he makes his immortal appeal to the heart. In these poems, a wide range of mystical emotion is brought into play, from the loftiest abstractions, the most otherworldly passion for the infinite, to the most intimate and personal realization of God, expressed in homely metaphors and religious symbols, drawn indifferently from the Hindu and the Muslim belief. It is impossible to say of their author that he was Brahmin or Sufi, Vedantist or Vaishnavite. Well, Sufi, Islamic influence, are they Muslim or are they not Muslim? It depends. Yeah, well, you can say he's Sufi, but he is, as he says himself, at once the child of Allah and of Ram. Again, metaphor. And if Ram is divine, then Ram is just a name of Allah. Hari, Ram, Krishna, they can be applied if you don't think the personifications and identifications, they can be applied. Same thing with Vishnu and Brahma and Shiva and Kali and a whole bunch of others. That supreme spirit, whom he knew and adored, and whose joyous friendship he sought to induct the souls of other men, transcended, whilst he included all metaphysical categories and creedal definitions, yet each contributed something to the description of that infinite and simple totality, who revealed himself according to their measure to the faithful lovers of all creeds. Kabir's story is surrounded by the contradictory legends, on none of which reliance can be placed. Some of these emanate from a Hindu, some from a Muslim source, and claim him by turns as a Sufi and a Brahmin saint. His name, however, is practically a conclusive proof of Muslim ancestry, and that the most probable tale is that which represents him as the actual or adopted child of the Muslim weaver of Benares, the city in which the chief events of his life took place. In 15th century Benares, the syncretistic tendencies of Bhakti religion had reached full development. Sufis and Brahmins appear to have met in disputation, the most spiritual members of both creeds frequenting the teachings of Ramananda, whose repudiation was then at its height. The boy Kabir, in whom the religious passion was innate, saw in Ramananda his destined teacher, but he knew how slight were the chances that a Hindu guru would accept a Muslim as a disciple. And Islam teaches people to go to India, China, wherever to seek knowledge. Not to, per se, compromise with religion, but it doesn't mean that we can't learn about other paths. He therefore hid upon the steps of the river Ganges, where Ramananda was accustomed to bathe, with the result that the master, coming down to the water, trod upon his body unexpectedly, and exclaimed in his astonishment, Ram Ram, the name of the incarnation under which he worshipped God. Well, the quality. Well, they worshipped incarnations, but the quality, per se, might be what Kabir identified with. Kabir then declared that he had received the mantra of initiation from Ramananda's lips, and was by it admitted to discipleship. In spite of the protests of orthodox Brahmins and Muslimin, both equally annoyed by this contempt of theological landmarks, he persisted in his claim, thus exhibiting in action that very principle of the religious synthesis which Ramananda had sought to establish in thought. Ramananda appears to have accepted him, and though Islamic legend speaks of the famous Sufi Pir Taqi of Jhansi as Kabir's master in later life, the Hindu saint is the only human teacher to whom, in his songs, he acknowledges indebtedness. The little that we know of Kabir's life contradicts many current ideas concerning the Oriental mystic, of the stages of discipline through which he passed, the manner in which his spiritual genius developed. We are completely ignorant. He seems to have remained for years the disciple of Ramananda, joining in the theological and philosophical arguments which his master held with all the great mullahs and Brahmins of his day. And of this very source we may perhaps trace his acquaintance with the terms of Hindu and Sufi philosophy. And just like Zoroastrianism and Greek philosophy and whatever, different Sufi traditions kind of either compromised or put things in the terms of those. He may or may not have submitted to the traditional education of the Hindu or the Sufi contemplative. It is clear, at any rate, that he never adopted the life of the professional ascetic or retired from the world in order to devote himself to bodily mortifications, and the exclusive pursuit of the contemplative life, side by side with his interior life of adoration, its artistic expression in music and words, for he was a skilled musician as well as a poet. He lived the sane and diligent life of the Oriental craftsman. All the legends agree on this point, that Kabir was a weaver, a simple and unlettered man who earned his living at the loom, like Paul the tentmaker, Boheme the cobbler, Bunyan the tinker, the Ter Stegen the ribbon maker. He knew how to combine vision and industry. The work of his hands helped, rather than hindered, the impassioned meditation of his heart. Hating mere bodily austerities, he was no ascetic, but a married man, the father of a family, a circumstance which Hindu legends of the monastic type vainly attempt to conceal or explain, and it was from out of the heart of the common life that he sang his rapturous lyrics of divine love. Here the works corroborate the traditional story of his life. Again and again he extols the life of home, the value and reality of diurnal existence, with its opportunities for love and renunciation, pouring contempt upon the professional sanctity of the yogi, who has a great beard and matted locks, and looks like a goat, and on all who think it necessary to flee a world pervaded by love, joy, and beauty, the proper theater of man's quest in order to find that one reality who has spread his form of love throughout all the world. And specifically, we're gonna make it through 100 of them, God willing. But 11, 40, 43, 66, and 76 in particular. It does not need much experience of ascetic literature to recognize the boldness and originality of this attitude in such a time and place. From the point of view of the orthodox sanctity, whether Hindu or Muslim, Kabir was plainly a heretic. Well, if a heretic's thinking for yourself, why not? And his frank dislike of all institutional religion, all external observance, which was as thorough and as intense as that of the Quakers themselves, completed, so far as ecclesiastical opinion was concerned, his reputation as a dangerous man. The simple union with divine reality, which he perpetually extolled as alike the duty and the joy of every soul, was independent both of ritual and of bodily austerities. The God whom he proclaimed was neither in the Kaaba nor in the Kailash. That's a phrase. God's everywhere, but I don't know. We'll see if he thinks that God is limited to space. Those who sought him needed not to go far, for he waited discovery everywhere, more accessible to the washerwoman and the carpenter than to the self-righteous holy man. And we see poems 1, 2, and 41. Therefore, the whole apparatus of piety, Hindu and Muslim alike, the temple and mosque, idol and holy water, scriptures and priests, were denounced by this inconveniently clear-sighted poet as mere substitutes for reality, dead things intervening between the soul and its love. The images are all lifeless. They cannot speak. I know, for I have cried aloud to them. The Purana and Al-Quran are mere words lifting up the curtain I have seen. Poems 42, 65, and 67. This sort of thing cannot be tolerated by any organized church, and it is not surprising that Kabir, having his headquarters in Benares, the very center of priestly influence, was subjected to considerable persecution. The well-known legend of the beautiful courtesan sent by the Brahmins to tempt his virtue and converted, like the Magdalene, by her sudden encounter with the initiate of a higher love, preserves the memory of the fear and dislike with which he was regarded by the ecclesiastical powers. Once at last, after the performance of a supposed miracle of healing, he was brought before the Emperor Sikander Lodi and charged with claiming the possession of divine powers. But Sikander Lodi, a ruler of considerable culture, was tolerant of the eccentricities of saintly persons belonging to his own faith. Kabir, being of Muslim birth, well, it said that everybody said Muslim birth, and then people choose ethnic faiths and polytheism, or even choose to claim nothing. But the Hindu generally meant that they really thought it was essential that, oh, I can't have you as a disciple. You're not born of this class. So, we can't accept you as one of us spiritually because you weren't born into this family, because of the family you were born into. So, was outside the authority of the Brahmins and technically classed with the Sufis, to whom great theological latitude was allowed. Therefore, he was banished. In the interest of peace from Benares, his life was spared. This seems to have happened in 1495, when he was nearly 60 years of age. It is the last event of his career of which we have definite knowledge. Thence, he appears to have moved amongst various cities of northern India, the center of a group of disciples, continuing in exile that life of apostle and poet of love to which he declares in one of his songs he was destined from the beginning of time. In 1518, an old man, broken in health, and with hands so feeble that he could no longer make the music which he loved, he died at Maghar near Gorakhpur. A beautiful legend tells us that after his death, his Muslim and Hindu disciples disputed the possession of his body, which the Muslim wished to bury, the Hindus to burn. As they argued together, Kabir appeared before them and told them to lift the shroud and look at that which lay beneath. They did so and found in the place of the corpse a heap of flowers, half of which were buried by the Muslimin at Maghar and half carried by the Hindus to the holy city of Benares to be burned. Fitting conclusion to a life which made fragrant the most beautiful doctrines of two great creeds. And perhaps they could have lost track of his body and, maybe went back to where they had him at one place before setting down. It's like, oh, there's flowers here, so this must be. Or it could be mass delusion, as they ripped apart his body and burnt one part and buried another part.